So guys, please subscribe to the channel and please smash the like button on this video. So guys, in this next news story, two men who murdered a 16-year-old Afghan refugee in a case of mistaken identity have been jailed for life. Vanushan, Balakrishnan and Ilyas Suleiman, who were both then aged 17, stabbed to death Rishmeet Singh after wrongly thinking he belonged to a rival gang in November 2021. The pair chased Rishmeet down a street in Southall in West London before inflicting 15 stab wounds, including 5 to his back, during a 27-second episode of heinous violence. Rishmeet, who was an aspiring police officer who fled Afghanistan to escape the Taliban after they had killed his father 2 years earlier, was pronounced dead at the scene a short time later. Balakrishnan and Ilyas Suleiman, who are now 18, were today jailed for life with minimum terms of 24 years and 21 years respectively. The pair from Hillingdon were found guilty of murder in March following a trial at the Old Bailey. The sentencing was televised with Judge Sarah Monroe Casey. The same judge from yesterday's video told the defendants this case is yet another tragic example of the needless loss of another teenager following a violent stabbing on the streets of London. This case is the more tragic because Rishmeet was an entirely innocent victim. He was described as a good person who would not hurt a fly. He has never been involved in any kind of violence. It defies belief you two sought out to kill him.
This court is very familiar, and from which such knives, for which there is no legitimate use, can be bought with impunity. The knife you bought was similar to the one which the police had taken from you earlier in the year. The 24th of November 2021 was the day of the murder. Rishmeet Singh was socialising with his friends. They were not drinking alcohol or taking drugs. He was not armed. CCTV showed the two of you leaving 68 Austin Road at 8:47 p.m, having changed from the clothes that you were wearing earlier. You, Mr. Suleiman, had a particularly large 3-foot-long machete-style knife concealed in your tracksuit trousers. You, Mr. Balakrishnan, either took the knife, which you had purchased with you from number 68, or you collected it from a stash by the canal en route to the rival territory. You were each riding a bicycle. You identified Rishmeet and his friends as potential targets, and you began to chase them. By chance, a BMW was in the area, which may well have contained gang rivals, and interaction between you and the occupants of that car may have led you wrongly to associate Rishmeet and his friends with a Southall gang.
Balakrishnan also admitted GBH after a fellow inmate was left in a life-threatening condition in Feltham Young Offenders Institution on the 1st of July 2022. Marquez Walker, who's 17, the story that I did yesterday for stabbing the 14-year-old Jermaine Cools to death in Croydon, had also taken part in that same attack. So basically, both guys got life sentences a day after each other, and both were involved in beating up a man so badly that he ended up getting brain damaged in prison. So the trial earlier heard how Rishmeet had been enjoying an evening at the park and was walking home when the two unknown males began running towards him at around 9 o'clock on November the 24th, 2021. Rishmeet immediately began sprinting towards his friends who were shouting, "Run, run." But he tripped and fell to the floor in Raleigh Road, where one of the two defendants stabbed him 5 times in the back. The second attacker then stabbed him at least 10 times. Police and medics were alerted by a member of the public and rushed to the scene, but Rishmeet was pronounced dead at 10 o'clock at night. The attackers were subsequently captured on CCTV fleeing and were identified by their clothing. Following the arrest of Balakrishnan, police recovered a notebook containing rap lyrics glorifying the murder. That lad yesterday, he was also glorifying his crimes. So the picture of his bloodstained knife posted on social media after the murder was found on his mobile phone. So a review of Balakrishnan's phone showed that he was reading news reports about Rishmeet's murder just an hour after the incident. Balakrishnan had also had a previous conviction for possessing a Rambo knife, for which he was given a referral order in February 2021. So in Balakrishnan's phone, some of the articles were tributes from Rishmeet's family about his good character and their belief he was stabbed for a fake Gucci pouch he was wearing. On November the 28th, 2021, Balakrishnan wrote a note on his phone saying, Saw news statement, it says a good youth, but he was out with pagans, which means enemies. Stupid media, it was a glide, not for some stupid shit he wears. So a glide is where a person enters gang territory with the intention of using violence against a rival gang. Just 6 hours before his arrest, on December the 2nd, Balakrishnan wrote on his phone, "He tripped and got dipped into my dank." A notebook later found at Balakrishnan's home contained the words, "Feel my blade rip through his flesh. Bro told me you ready to go on a glide tonight. I was so excited like a kid going to a fun fair ride." He also wrote, "Trying to push my nank through his lungs. He got left screaming like Alvin and the Chipmunks and Ops running. I'm catching up, so don't get chefed in the back. But one tripped and he fell, knew it was over. I was swinging by shank." Guys, honestly, as I said yesterday, who listens to this kind of shit? So Rishmeet, meanwhile, had no involvement in street violence, but the defendants mistakenly thought he was part of a rival gang. So he'd actually fled Afghanistan, Jalalabad, in October 2019, and when his mother and grandmother brought him to what they believed was the safety of the UK, he enrolled in a public service course with the hope of becoming a police officer. Detective Inspector Laura Semple said Rishmeet was an innocent young 16-year-old who had his whole life ahead of him. He just spent an enjoyable evening with his friends, was making a short walk home when he was callously chased down and knifed to death by Balakrishnan and Suleiman. Between them, they stabbed him 15 times while he was defenseless on the floor. This is never an excuse to murder anyone in cold blood, but this case is made even more tragic by the fact that Rishmeet was wrongly attacked by his attackers. Balakrishnan and Suleiman left the flat that day with the intention of ending someone's life. Poor Rishmeet was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Rishmeet's mother stated, "I just want to say I do not know what my child has done that they killed him in this way. My son has got proper justice. I do not want these people to come out. I want them to stay inside for the rest of their lives." She added, "Rishmeet was my only child and he had his whole life ahead of him. No words could ever explain or put into context how I have felt since Rishmeet was taken from us. He has been raised with so much love and now he's gone. So just want to say rest in peace, Rishmeet, and my condolences go out to your family." So guys, this is a new story coming in where two men who killed an innocent boy have been jailed for life. So guys, this is how the sentencing went down.
And Ilyas Suleiman, you are both here today to be sentenced, having been convicted by the jury on the 6th of March of the murder of 16-year-old Rishmeet Singh. You may remain seated until I tell you to stand up. You, Mr. Balakrishnan, are also here for an offence of causing grievous bodily harm with intent, contrary to Section 18 of the Offences Against the Person Act, which was committed by you on the 1st of July of 2022 while you were on remand at Feltham Young Offender Institution. I'm going to call that the Section 18 offence. You pleaded guilty to that offence on the 10th of March of this year. This case is yet another tragic example of the needless loss of a young teenager's life following a violent stabbing on the streets of London. This case is the more tragic because Rishmeet was an entirely innocent victim. At your trial, all who knew Rishmeet spoke very fondly of him. He was described by friends as a good person who would not harm a fly, as pure of heart and a humble guy. He wouldn't get into a beef with anyone. He was never involved in any kind of violence. He had no convictions or cautions. He did not drink alcohol or take drugs. And it defies belief that you two sought him out to kill him. The impact of his death at your hands cannot be overstated. In her victim personal statement, his mother, Mrs. Kaur, tells a heart-rending story. In 2019, she came to the UK with her mother and her only child, Rishmeet, as asylum seekers from Afghanistan. Rishmeet's father had been killed by the Taliban. The Taliban had tried to kidnap Rishmeet and convert him to Islam. As Sikhs, the local Gurdwara helped them escape. They came here to seek a safe life. Neither she nor her mother speak good English. They were reliant upon Rishmeet for communication. Rishmeet was his mother's carer, as she is disabled by polio. They moved to Southall to be closer to an Afghan Sikh community. With hindsight, that decision to move will haunt Rishmeet's mother and grandmother for the rest of their lives. With Rishmeet's help, they obtained a flat. He was a vital and invaluable conduit in all administrative tasks. Rishmeet showed all the signs of growing into a valued member of society. He hoped to become a police officer. Against that background, with hope for a peaceful future and a productive and rewarding life for her son, Mrs. Cower describes her loss following her son's murder. She cannot put into words the impact upon herself and Rishmeet's grandmother. She says, "I have lost everything and my life is over. I will never get over losing him in this way." She will not see him grow up and fulfill his aspirations. He had his whole future ahead of him. His mother now feels lonely and isolated. 16 months since Rishmeet's death and her pain has not subsided. She's on medication for depression. Her mother, too, is devastated at the loss of her grandson. Your actions have left those two women entirely bereft, with no male figure in their lives, in a country where they don't speak the language, a country where they sought refuge from a violent regime, only to face the ultimate loss as a result of what you two did. Nothing I can do or say today can bring Rishmeet back or relieve the pain your actions have caused. No term of years will be sufficient punishment so far as his mother and grandmother are concerned. No term of years can even begin to compensate them. You two are very close friends. You were both 17 in November 2021 when you committed the murder. From about September 2020, you, Mr. Balakrishnan, started hanging around in Hayes, and there you met older Hayes Town gang members and quickly became involved in the gang culture. You saw their expensive clothes and their postings of gang signs, and you were attracted by the scene. You were initially sucked in by the offer of free cannabis, but you ran up debts and were forced to deal Class A drugs as a result. It is an all too familiar picture in this court. A safe house at 68 Austin Road was used as a base by the gang to store drugs and weapons. On the 21st of January of 2021, you, Mr. Balakrishnan, was stopped by police and found to be in possession of a lethal knife. You received a referral order and were allocated a social worker who taught you the dangers of knife crime. On the 11th of June of the same year, you were stopped by police and found in possession of heroin, crack cocaine, cash and 2 phones. By then, you were involved in the regular drug dealing for which you were paid considerable sums of money. You, Mr. Suleiman, got to know gang members through Mr. Balakrishnan. You have no previous convictions, and people who know you speak very highly of you. However, you too were given cannabis and became a regular user. I am of the firm view that by the time of the murder, you too were an enthusiastic gang member who was willing to join in with the nefarious activities of the Hayes Town gang. I note that your half-sister confirms my view. The two of you would go to the Austin Road estate every day where you'd hang out with other gang members and smoke cannabis. On the 19th of November 2021, you, Mr. Balakrishnan, purchased a large Rambo-style machete from the internet sites with which this court is very familiar, and from which such knives, for which there is no legitimate use, can be bought with impunity. The knife you bought was similar to the one which the police had taken from you earlier in the year. The 24th of November 2021 was the day of the murder. Rishmeet Singh was socialising with his friends. They were not drinking alcohol or taking drugs. He was not armed. CCTV showed the two of you leaving 68 Austin Road at 8:47 p.m, having changed from the clothes that you were wearing earlier. You, Mr. Suleiman, had a particularly large 3-foot-long machete-style knife concealed in your tracksuit trousers. You, Mr. Balakrishnan, either took the knife, which you had purchased with you from number 68, or you collected it from a stash by the canal en route to the rival territory. You were each riding a bicycle. You identified Rishmeet and his friends as potential targets, and you began to chase them. By chance, a BMW was in the area, which may well have contained gang rivals, and interaction between you and the occupants of that car may have led you wrongly to associate Rishmeet and his friends with a Southall gang. The two of you approached Rishmeet's group in a threatening manner. His friends were able to escape, but Rishmeet ran off on his own, and when he tripped over, the CCTV showed that the two of you ferociously attacked him, each of you stabbing him repeatedly with those lethal knives. You, Mr. Balakrishnan, made 5 separate stabbing movements. You, Mr. Suleiman, a further 10. As Rishmeet lay dying in a doorway, you headed off, collected the bikes and rode back to number 68. There you changed your clothes and went to your respective homes by taxi. You both went back to number 68 the following day and arranged for the bikes and your blood-stained clothing to be disposed of. At the scene where Rishmeet was to die, the emergency services had been called at 9:07. He had suffered multiple sharp force injuries to his head and chest and penetrating injuries to his brain, liver and lung. There were through and through injuries to his arm, which were consistent with defensive injuries as he held his arms up to try to protect himself. There were at least 11 and up to 15 separate stab wounds. Despite the efforts of the medics, his injuries were not survivable, and he died at the scene. The very same night, you, Mr. Balakrishnan, having taken your blood-stained knife back to your bedroom, photographed it and posted a photograph on social media. You then wrote drill lyrics glorifying the killing, which included lines such as, "One tripped and fell, and he knew it was over. I was swinging my shank, swinging my blade back and forth, trying to turn him off. He tripped and got dipped onto my shank. Chasing him with a nank, really trying to open his chest apart, trying to push my knife through his lungs." Those chilling lyrics were found in the very notebook in which you had recorded the lessons you'd learned about the dangers of knife crime as part of your referral order. You were arrested at your home on the 2nd of December of 2021. You did not answer police questions. You, Mr. Suleiman, ran away from your home when you heard about Mr. Balakrishnan's arrest. Your mother reported you missing. You were arrested at a cousin's address on the 8th of December. You admit that you were planning to leave the country. You also did not answer police questions. You were both remanded into custody, and you, Mr. Balakrishnan, were held at Feltham Young Offender Institution. The second serious offence of violence for which I have to deal with you took place on the 1st of July 2022. That was when you were still on remand for the murder at Feltham. You and 4 other inmates, including Marcus Walker, who I sentenced yesterday, were in the exercise yard at around 10:30 in the morning. There is poor quality footage of the incident. However, several prison officers were able to describe what took place. Even after that, the attack continued. During the attack, Walker was heard to shout, "Finish him off," and this is how you put mans to sleep. Walker also said, "I had to start it, that's what you get," to which you responded repeatedly, "Rest in peace." The two of you were laughing. The motive was unconscious. When he briefly regained consciousness, he begged the officers to save his life, saying, "I have a daughter." He then fell back into unconsciousness. He was taken to hospital by air ambulance. He had suffered increased pressure and bleeding to his brain, which was life-threatening. He underwent lengthy surgery, but is left with permanent and significant brain damage. His cognitive functions are badly affected, and he will require lengthy rehabilitation and ongoing long-term input from multidisciplinary teams in order to support him in reaching his full potential. I then turn to the approach to sentence. In relation to the murder, you are both now 18, you were both 17 at the date of the murder. As you both know, the sentence for murder is fixed by law, and I must pass a life sentence upon you both. Due to the fact that you were under 18 when the murder was committed, the sentence is one of detention at His Majesty's pleasure. I have to set the minimum term that you must each serve before you can be considered for release by the parole board. I begin by identifying the appropriate starting point under paragraph 5A of Schedule 21 of the Sentencing Act 2020, as amended by Section 127 of the Police, Crime and Sentencing and Courts Act 2022. Because you each took a knife to the scene and had it with you intending to use it, as you in fact did, the starting point is now one of 23 years. I observe that the starting point for a 16-year-old is 6 years lower, namely 17 years. That was, in fact, the starting point I took in the case of Walker, who I sentenced for a different murder yesterday. The aggravating factors are these. 1, in your case, Mr. Balakrishnan, your previous conviction for possession of a knife. 2, in both your cases, that you planned the offence, you changed your clothing, disguised your faces, and travelled to rival gang territory with the sole purpose of attacking members of a rival gang. You, Mr. Balakrishnan, put your phone onto flight mode, and you, Mr. Suleiman, gave your phone to another gang member so that it could be used to lay a false trail. 3, this was gang-related offending. 4, you both took steps to avoid being connected to the murder. You disposed of your clothing and arranged for the bicycles to be discarded. 5, you, Mr. Balakrishnan, posted that picture of one of the murder weapons onto social media and glorified your actions in sickening drill lyrics. Finally, you, Mr. Suleiman, got rid of your phone, went to ground and planned to flee the country. You also changed your appearance. Turning to mitigation. In your case, Mr. Balakrishnan, having heard you give evidence and read reports upon you, I regard the following as mitigating factors. 1, your immaturity. Whilst your chronological age is reflected in the reduction of the starting point for the minimum term from 25 years for an adult down to 23 years, I also need to consider the case law, which emphasises that a person's actual maturity may be different from that to be expected at their age. You are described in reports as young for your age. You have limited intellectual functioning and emotional intelligence. Secondly, you have been found to have been a victim of modern slavery. Thirdly, you have a lack of formal positive structure or role models in your life. And fourthly, you are susceptible to pressure from others. Your psychological profile suggested that you took a notably passive role in relationships and depended on others for guidance. And you have reduced intellectual functioning. In your case, Mr. Suleiman, whilst there are no reports, I heard you give evidence also, and I have read the numerous testimonials. I take the following factors into account in your favour: your lack of convictions, your immaturity and susceptibility to pressure as a result of wanting to fit in. Thirdly, the lack of a stable home structure at a crucial time in your life. And fourthly, the obviously positive character traits described by the character witnesses. None who know you can believe that you got yourself involved in this most serious offence. The complementary adjectives used to describe the young man who those people describe are all totally opposite of the young man who made the decision to go out with a huge knife and inflict misery upon others by killing a 16-year-old child. Sadly, you threw away all that good when you made that decision. I note the realistic assessment by your older sister, who observed a deterioration and a change in you. She saw you getting embroiled into the gang culture and running drugs for the gang leaders for about 4 months prior to the murder. Balancing the aggravating and mitigating factors in each of your cases, I see no reason to make any distinction between the two of you in relation to the murder. Having balanced the competing factors, I have come to the conclusion that the appropriate minimum term in each of your cases for the murder is 21 years. In your case, Mr. Balakrishnan, the minimum term must be increased to reflect the Section 18 offence. The group attack upon a fellow inmate involved significant planning. It was a revenge attack upon a youth who your group perceived to be a snitch. The victim suffered particularly grave and life-threatening injury. That offence fell within Category 1A of the relevant guideline, with a starting point for an adult of 12 years and a range of 10 to 16 years. There are a number of aggravating factors. One, the fact that this was an attack within a custodial setting. Two, the fact that you were on remand, having pleaded not guilty to Rishmeet's murder. And three, your previous conviction. The mitigating factors are those which I have set out above in relation to the murder. I do not repeat them. In relation to this offence, the mitigating factors balance out the aggravating factors. I emphasise that I have guarded against any double counting and borne firmly in mind the youth guideline, the guideline relating to mentally disordered offenders, and totality. You were days away from your 18th birthday when you committed that Section 18 offence. However, your role in the offence was slightly less significant than that of Walker, and accordingly the same sentence is merited as that which I identified in his case. That is a sentence before plea of 8 years detention. You were originally charged with attempted murder, to which you pleaded not guilty. You entered a plea to the Section 18 offence on the 10th of March of 2023. Your trial had been listed for July of this year. You deserve 25% credit for your plea, which gives a term of 6 years. Whilst the sentence for the Section 18 will be imposed concurrently, that offence will be reflected, as I have said, in the increased minimum term attached to the murder sentence. I then have to consider dangerousness. In your case, I am of the firm view that despite your youth and the other matters to which I have referred, on all the facts of this case, you do present a significant risk of serious harm to the public, occasioned by the commission by you of further specified offences. The author of the pre-sentence report is of the same view. In my judgment, acknowledging that a life sentence is a last resort, the Section 18 offence is in itself serious enough to justify a life sentence, and there is no reliable estimate of the length of time you will remain a danger. In any event, of course, you will be serving the life sentence which I am about to impose for the murder of Rishmeet. Would you both stand up, please? The sentences I pass upon you are as follows. Vanushan Balakrishnan, for the murder, detention at His Majesty's pleasure with a minimum term of 24 years. For the Section 18, detention at His Majesty's pleasure with a minimum term of 4 years. That's 2/3 of the notional determinate term. You have spent 524 days in detention on remand, which will count towards your sentence. So the minimum term is 24 years less 524 days. Ilyas Suleiman, the sentence I pass upon you for the murder is detention at His Majesty's pleasure with a minimum term of 21 years. You have spent 517 days in detention on remand, which will count towards your sentence. And so the minimum term is 21 years less 517 days. If the information which I've been provided with as to days in detention on remand proves to be inaccurate, then the prosecution or defence must notify the court so that the case can be relisted to correct the calculation as soon as possible, and in any event within 56 days of today. You must both understand, and all those who are listening must understand, that you will not be released when you have served those minimum terms. Indeed, you will only be released if and when the parole board conclude that either or both of you no longer pose a risk of harm to the public, and that will not be until you have served at least every day of the minimum terms which I have just imposed. That's the sentence of the court. They may go down. Thank you.
So guys, once again, I just want to say rest in peace, Rishmeet, and my condolences go out to your family. Another tragic story coming from the streets of the UK. Also guys, if you can, in the link in the description below. I've put the video to my other channel, so if you can go and check that video out and show some support over there, guys, it'd be really appreciated. It's your boy GC. Keep it locked, keep it real.